Let's take a look at Washington State and the reasons locals say not to move there. Washington State is in the Pacific Northwest along with Oregon and Idaho. Did you know that? Did you know Idaho was part of the Pacific Northwest? I was surprised when I learned that too, and I'm sure it irritates most Idaho residents to no end, knowing that they share anything with Oregon besides a border. Anyway, most surveys rank Washington State as one of the best states to live in the United States, with many of those in recent years having them at the #1 spot. Today we'll look at why Washington isn't for everyone though. Every place on the planet has its good and its bad. There is no paradise, there is no fantasy island. Some people are gonna like it, some people ain't. This video's not made to tell people not to move to the Evergreen State. We are just looking at some problems they have that you should probably know before you start looking for a house and calling realtors. Some things on here you might find appealing, but to most people, they aren't. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, the high cost of living. The cost of living in Washington State is higher than the national average. In 2022, the cost of living index for Washington State was 123.1. The easiest way to look at that index is like this. If you take the average state, which in 2022 was Minnesota, and if you were to purchase anything for $100, let's say it's Pop Rocks and soda. In Minnesota, that costs you $100. In Washington, it cost $123.10, just enough to kill the average person. If you're too young and you don't get that reference, ask your parents, or I'll tell you. Back in the 80s, there was an urban legend that if you ate Pop Rocks and drank soda at the same time, your stomach would explode and you'd die there on the playground. I tried that after my first girlfriend broke up with me. It just gave me gas. But yeah, everything's expensive in Washington State, not just Pop Rocks and soda. It's not the most expensive state in the union, but it's up there. Number 9, terrible traffic. Now, obviously, this is just going to be the Seattle area, where most of the people live, so it makes sense this is on people's minds. From Olympia to Tacoma to Seattle to Everett, you're going to run into some traffic. That whole area, it's pretty rough. Sure, if you head out east to the Washington Outback, you're not going to see much traffic, but yeah, that whole Seattle area, the metro area, it's a nightmare. What's strange about it is during the winter months, it's not as bad as it is during the summer months. Because during the summer months, that's when they start doing road work, because the weather's good. That just slows down the traffic and makes it harder. I mean, outside that area, it's a great place to drive around. I mean, the state is frickin' beautiful. It's a great state for a road trip, but that is until you get to the Seattle area, then you start to cry a little bit. I'll give you an idea how bad it is in the Seattle metro area. The average commute time in the United States is 17.2 minutes. In the Seattle metro area, it's 26.4 minutes. Number 8, weather and climate. Yes, this is a big complaint for a lot of people living in the Seattle metro area. I think people that will live there forever are used to it and they kind of live with it and they understand it. But if you're new to the area, let's say you've only lived there a handful of years, it'll wear on you. Washington has long, dark winters. The days are short and the weather can be, cold and dreary. One of the biggest complaints about people new to Seattle, it doesn't seem like they get enough sun every day. I thought that was interesting, so I did a little bit of research on that. Didn't get too far into it, but I found different things about how, because of cloud cover, some people consider they didn't get enough daylight, but that's really not accurate. Didn't get enough sunlight. Sun's still there, it's just behind the clouds, but then of course, the further you go from the equator, the less daylight you'll get, and Seattle's pretty high up there. The entire state of Washington is. Not by a whole bunch, it's not like you're moving to Nome, Alaska, where a one-night stand can last 30 days, but enough to notice. Seattle also gets a ton of rain, especially in the western part of the state. The average annual rainfall in Seattle is a little over 39 inches. Now, obviously, snowfall varies throughout the state. You go up to the mountains, it's going to be a lot. You go down to the lower parts, the eastern part, not as much. But let's take Seattle, where most of the people live and most people move to. They get less than 10 inches a year, normally. Now, they have had some years where it's gone way over that, but that's usually what they get, around that. Number 7, high crimes. The crime rate in Washington State is higher than a lot of other states. In 2020, the violent crime rate in Washington State was 3.6 for every 1,000 residents. That's just the violent crime. And that's higher than the national average, which at the same time was 3.1. Still nothing compared to Detroit, where it's like 10.2 for every 1,000 residents, and I think Memphis is around 12.8. So it's not bad, but people do complain about it. Obviously, you're going to have a lot of crime in the Seattle area because it's a city. Cities have more crime than rural areas because more people means more problems. But it's not just Seattle. If you go out to the eastern side of the state, you got Spokane, and they've got a whole bunch of crime problems. Number 6, lack of diversity. Yes, this is a complaint by some people, and I hate bringing it up because we're just going to get a whole bunch of people in the comment section that need to say things like diversity is a bad thing. Not saying it's 100% good, but I think diversity makes the world a lot more interesting and better. But Washington really doesn't have much of it. About 70% of Washington's population is white. 13.7% is Hispanic. About 11% is Asian. African American is about 5.3. Native Americans about 3.2. And Pacific Islanders has 1.4. Number 5, natural disasters. Now, this one's a little weird because the ones that everyone's afraid of don't happen that often, hardly at all. Washington State is prone to natural disasters such as earthquakes, volcanoes, and floods. Floods you're going to get every single winter. That happens. Earthquakes every so often, and the last time they had a significant volcano blow up was 1980. So quit worrying about it. Sure, Mount St. Helens blew up. That was amazingly devastating to the area, but it happened in 1980, okay? Quit worrying about it. If you are worried about it, don't live at the top of a mountain that happens to have smoke billowing out of the earth. Number 4, lack of jobs. Now, Washington State does have a lot of jobs. The problem is they got a lot of people trying to get those jobs, and we're talking about the high-paying ones. Usually in the tech industry, things like that, aerospace, whatever. They have a lot of those jobs, but they just have even more qualified candidates. A lot of people that were just working normal tech jobs have kind of shifted their focus to healthcare technology because that seems to be a little bit better way to get a job and still working in tech. Healthcare always has jobs. But that's the biggest problem people say working and living in, especially the Seattle area. There's just too much competition for the good paying jobs. Number 3, the residents are unfriendly. Yeah, I could see this one, especially when you take Seattle into consideration. Seattle has this thing up there they call the Seattle Freeze, where if you're new to the area, it's really hard to make friends. So in the cities especially, there's this lack of welcoming atmosphere. And if you move there, it takes a long time to start feeling like you belong, I guess. Washington, and again, especially in the Seattle area, it's also known for being one of the worst places to be single and in the dating scene. Number 2, the homelessness. Yes, the homelessness. You knew we'd be getting to this eventually. Everybody knows Seattle, especially, has a pretty bad homeless situation. Any city in Washington has a fair amount of homeless. Same thing going on down here in Portland and Los Angeles. The West Coast is just silly with homeless people. Now, not wishing any ill will on them, but these people are in a bad situation. They just drain the resources of a community, and they bring other problems like real estate prices going down, which you'll find in number 1. Seattle could use some of that. Crime gets spiked in areas where there's a lot of homeless people. They have to put money in addiction services, housing services, and mental health services. Costs money. And it hurts the community. I'm not talking bad about these people. I am just stating a fact, a statistical fact that they drain communities and they need help. But it is a problem. And it's something people take into consideration when they're moving there or when they're living there. Myself, I go up to Seattle a few times a year, handful of times a year. There's a company up there I do voiceover work with. One of the only ones that doesn't let me do it from home, which kind of sucks, but they pay good. Every time I've gone up there, I've been up there 2 or 3 days. I don't see as many homeless as I have in Portland. In Seattle, if you don't see them, they're staying underneath the overpasses. We don't have much of that here in Portland. I mean, they do, but they also camp out on the streets a lot. More than I'd say I've seen in Seattle. Now, I haven't scoured the entire city. This is just my observation. I'm sure that's going to lead to someone leaving comments. I'm sure a few people about how bad it is. They'll tell me where they all are and all that. Great. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There is a link for that in the description area below. All right, on to number 1. And number 1. The real estate is insane. Yes, insane is a perfect way to explain how bad the real estate market is in all the cities of Washington. Sure, even the rural communities are pretty expensive compared to other states, but you run into the ridiculousness when you start getting in the cities, especially Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, even down in Vancouver, Washington. It's nuts. The median home price in Washington state is $668,000. That's the median. That's number 3. California has $843,000 and Hawaii is $715,000. Obviously, part of the reason it's so high is the Seattle metro area. It's insane there. In recent months, I've been looking at homes in Washington, for the most part in the southern section near Ridgefield and Vancouver, Washington. Want to take advantage of that no state income tax they got going on over there. Besides having high real estate prices, they have a real problem with affordable housing, meaning their rents are high and they don't have many homes that are on the cheap side. So if you want to live, let's say in the Seattle metro area, you better make a lot of money or you better have a lot of roommates. Hopefully you don't have one of those roommates that eats your cereal and then replaces it with like the generic brand. You know, you had Cocoa Pebbles and now you have a Cocoa Pebbles box filled with Dino Bites from the dollar store or something. I've had a roommate that did things like that. He was a big dude. He used to dump a whole thing of Oreos in milk and eat it like cereal. I used to watch that guy eat, and I realized I'm staring at him like I'm watching an animal documentary on Animal Planet or something. Anyway, housing is expensive for everyone in Washington, not just dudes that eat cookies like their cereal. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a great day, and be nice to each other.